Hi there, it's the 6th Sunday after Epiphany, and I thought that I'd share a short video reflection on the scripture readings that have been suggested for today. And this will be the last regular video that I do for a while, because I'm finishing in the role that I've been at in Camberwell, and the next placement that I'm doing doesn't involve preaching, but I might do a video some weeks if I've been invited to come and preach somewhere. But I've really appreciated being able to join the folks at Camberwell for a bit over a year during what's been a strange and important era. The readings for today are from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 12 to 20, and Luke's Gospel chapter 6, verse 17 to 26. So feel free to pause the video and then start the video again once you've read them. This week I heard from a number of folks from across my church who were distressed by the federal government's so-called Religious Freedom Bill, which was to a large extent supported by the opposition. By Thursday the bill had been thrown out, but I know that it was causing a lot of people distress because it would have allowed churches and other religious groups to discriminate based on their religious beliefs. It was particularly being used to say that religious schools could discriminate against teachers and students on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity. It was particularly being used to target transgender kids, until some changes were made to protect trans kids. Members of the government and the opposition worked together to make sure that religious schools would not be able to discriminate against trans kids. And when those changes were made, the government decided to bin the bill because apparently targeting trans kids was the main point of the bill. So I was hearing from parents in our church concerned about the impact the debate was having on their kids' well-being. I was also hearing from members of the church being reminded of the fact that they're not welcome in many churches, including congregations in my own denomination. In some congregations, that's meant a loud and clear rejection, along with claims that queer people will be punished by God for eternity, because there are still congregations and presbyteries in my church that are taking that position. In other situations, it's just looked like a seemingly polite refusal to acknowledge the experience of queer Christians, or to even acknowledge their existence. But across the board, this bill was a reminder for many Christians that they're not completely welcome in the church. While I've been having this practice of preparing a sermon every week, I've been trying to make sure I follow a practice of looking at what's going on in our society and asking how it relates to what we've been hearing in the ancient stories of the Christian faith. And so that's been on my mind when I've been reflecting on today's scriptures and discussing them with other people during the week. In the reading from 1 Corinthians, it seems like Paul's concern is the importance of Christ's resurrection as a bodily reality, not just a spiritual reality. And we might find it difficult to believe in the resurrection of the body. But if we find that difficult, I don't think we should let it bother us too much, because there's still something very compelling about the idea of bodily resurrection. Paul's talking to a world where it was believed by many people that the spirit and the mind were good, but the body was bad. The idea was that the evil body made human beings do bad things. And many people who had a Greek worldview believed that the end of life was an escape from the evil body and from the evil world of material existence, and that liberation was happening, becoming a pure and virtuous spirit. This was in contrast to the Jewish idea that God had made human beings good, which we heard over Christmas. The Jewish idea was that God created human beings and recognized them as good, not as part good and part bad. And Western Christianity has often said that what happened later meant that human beings were no longer good. But in Judaism, the faith that these stories actually come from, and in the Eastern churches, that hasn't been the understanding. human beings have still been regarded as basically good, even though we can choose to act in evil ways. What Paul, who is a Jewish Christian who had been raised and educated in a Greek world, says is that when Jesus was killed, rather than his pure spirit leaving his sinful body and escaping to heaven, instead his spirit came back to his body and the body was resurrected. This is saying that the body is a good place to be. The body's not bad and evil and yuck. The hope of the church, as Paul sees it, is the resurrection of the body, not an escape from physical reality into a disembodied heaven. In the gospel reading, we hear an account of Jesus himself preaching with a focus on people's material, bodily reality. And we might be tempted to see what he's saying as being about an escape from the suffering of the body. But I don't think that's what this teaching is saying to us. Jesus talks about some contradictory experiences of physical, bodily reality and about a reversal. Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the reign of God. Blessed are you who are hungry now, for you will be filled. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, and when they exclude you, revile you, and defame you on account of the human one. But woe to you who are rich, for you've received consolation. Woe to you who are full now, for you'll be hungry. Woe to you who are laughing now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all speak well of you, for that is what their ancestors did to the false prophets. This might be concerning for us if we're wealthy or if we're comfortable, but we can join others in solidarity so that we can celebrate with them because we've joined them in their difficulty. And this is stuff that we already do. We do this with asylum seekers by listening to their stories and doing what we can to help in response, and by calling our leaders to stop mistreating them, calling our leaders to help them instead. We're thinking about how we do this with First Peoples. We need to listen to them about how the history of colonisation has affected them and how it continues to impact them. We need to respond by supporting them in what they're doing and allowing them to play their rightful role in these lands. Those of us, like me, who are colonists and migrants, need to give up power in the church and in this society so that First Peoples can exercise their sovereignty and make decisions that are best for their communities. And we can think about how we do this with queer folks, because we don't have this all sorted out in our church. It could be tempting to try and pat ourselves on the back and proudly tell our friends that we're a queer inclusive church, overlooking the fact that there are many places where our church hasn't accepted queer people and hasn't started accepting queer people, or only welcomes queer Christians if they keep quiet about their identity. We need to hear their voices and we need to listen to how they've been affected by the church's teachings. We need to listen to how they're affected by government laws and how they're affected by the public debate that goes on about their private lives. We need to be expressing our support for queer folks when people are making things difficult for them and asking what we can do to be supportive. If we join people in their grief, if we join people in their struggles, we can also join in the celebration when it's time for celebration. This is what we do when people in our community are struggling in other ways. This is what we do when someone we love is having difficulty. Because if one part of the body suffers, then all suffer. And if one part of the body celebrates, then all can celebrate with them, because the whole body has gone through the difficulty with them. In the church, we express this sense of solidarity when we share the Lord's Supper together as one body. I like to ask, what would it mean for us to suffer and celebrate together as one body at this time in our society?